welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. I'm your host, Pat, as always. So I've been kind of thinking, I've been seeing a lot of videos lately that are very nostalgic, where people talk about certain eras of their life, or just that kind of self-autobiographical thing from a bunch of YouTubers, metal and non. And I thought I would actually, give it a shot, give it a stab, if you will, and talk about certain years of my life and certain records that I was into. This is going to cause some double dipping, which I was apprehensive about doing at first, but I feel like when I go into doing these and talk about like a specific year out of my life, I'm going to go into the albums a lot more in depth than through a collection video or something like that, or even a recent pickups kind of thing, kind of get into the gristle and the grit a little bit more with certain albums that are influential in my life, had an impact, and what have you. So I wanted to talk about the year of our Lord, 1989. Before I get into 1989, which was a very important year for a lot of stuff, I should mention we're listening to this Obscurity bootleg that I got years ago. I think all this has seen an official release. At the time that I bought this, I don't think it had. This is both Obscurity demos on dubbed cassette, put out by a bootleg tape trade whatever company called Black Mass Prayer. I think they were from Greece, number 14. And this is both Obscurity demos, Ovations to Death from 1986 and Damnation's Pride from 1987. Just a photocopied cover there. Classic Swedish extreme stuff. Thrash metal that was a precursor to death and black metal. Great stuff, check it out. I'm pretty sure this stuff's been reissued, but I'm cool with having the tape. It's a nice presentation for demos. Dub tape. So I want to talk about 89. 89 was a very important year for me. I was 11 years old, and most of these I got into kind of the summer between 5th and 6th grade. As I mentioned before, I grew up in upstate New York, and as a kid there weren't a lot of people that were into what I was into. Primarily, most of my friends were into hip-hop. Not a lot of people were into any kind of rock and roll. My parents raised me on the Beatles and Elvis Costello and stuff like that. Still love Elvis. Like a handful of Beatles songs, but I'm not like a super fan or anything like that. Like into the more morose kind of bummer Beatles stuff like Eleanor Rigby and Nowhere Man, like those jams. Not really an album guy for that band, but not to get too far off the path and digress too much. At some point, I got into what was on MTV at the time, a lot of the hard rock, cock rock, hair metal kind of stuff. Loved Poison for a hot minute. Loved late 80s Aerosmith for a hot minute. Quickly kind of grew out of that. I think it was probably around the time I saw the One video on MTV for Metallica that I was made aware of like this heavier, more aggressive metal stuff going on. I was also heavily into skateboarding at that time, and although Thrasher magazine kind of focused a little bit more on hardcore punk, industrial alternative with their music coverage, Pusshead was a columnist at that time, so I was reading about all these bands that I'd never hear for years, like his band Septic Death, all this crazy Japanese hardcore that he talked about. Didn't really discover that stuff till years later. They covered New York hardcore too, which I got into pretty quickly. But a good entry-level thing, a good, gateway drug, if you will, for all that stuff was thrash metal, which was sort of on the decline at that point, as most of you know. 89 was the year that Sepultura's Beneath the Remains came out, also Slowly We Rot by Obituary, Altars of Madness by Morbid Angel. However, I didn't discover those records for at least 2 more years, because the internet wasn't around unless you had one of those modems that you set up. Modems with the phone cradle that you put the receiver down in, and just information didn't spread as quickly, So through magazines and stuff like that, and just kind of window shopping at the mall and at drugstores, I made a few great discoveries, probably the first of which was this, if memory serves. These I got all around the same time. This is a K-Tel comp called Thrash Metal. As you can see, it has a kind of cool, kind of cheesy skeleton guy shredding on a guitar. And side A, side 1, kicks off with Hook in Mouth by Megadeth, which is a fucking great song about censorship. Then you got Caught in a Mosh by Anthrax. You know, if you're into primo era Anthrax, it's one of their best. Evil Has No Boundaries by Slayer. This is the one that really, really got me, and I'll explain that in a moment. Mistress of Pain by Death Angel. Great song. A lot of people don't really care for Death Angel because they got kind of funky pretty early, kind of went off in some kind of not so great directions, in my opinion. But the Ultraviolence, that first record, is a fucking banger of a Bay Area thrash album. And Mistress of Pain is awesome. It's got some great wailing out, some great wailing, high-pitched vocals. And then you got Brainwashed by Nuclear Assault, which is just a great mid-tempo, chunky, mean-as-fuck moshy thrash metal song. Feeding You Regurgitated Pap is one of the great lyrics from it. It's, you know, about the media and newspapers and all that stuff. Very political and topical, like thrash metal was. Now, side B is the weird thing of this, the red herring, if you will. Kicks off with a Vinnie Vincent Invasion song. Vinnie Vincent being a Kiss guitarist at one point. I can't really remember what Vinnie Vincent Invasion sounds like. I actually had a live +2 EP not too long after this, and I can't remember anything about it. I know it was way heavier than Kiss, and it was a kind of shreddy, almost like Nitro or something, from what I've heard and vaguely remember. But I'm Alive by Helloween, just kind of revisited and rediscovered Helloween this year. But I'm Alive is a great song. 24 Hours Ago by Sabotage, which I have no recollection of whatsoever. Me Against the World by Lizzie Borden. This is an earworm. Lizzie Borden, great underrated fucking LA heavy metal band. This song in particular has a lot of significance to me because it's on the soundtrack for this movie called The Black Roses. It's a horror movie about a rock band. I haven't seen it since I was a kid, but I do remember that Me Against the World is in that movie over and over and over again. And I think it's still stuck in my head from when I saw it like in 90 or 91. And then it wraps up with Metal Messiah by The Great Cat. This Juilliard-trained shredder neoclassical thrash metal guitarist, this lady who is pretty nuts. I'll let you do your own research, look up interviews and stuff like that. A lot of her stuff is kind of unlistenable to me. It's a lot of like reinterpretations of classical stuff. Definitely a very talented person, but a very eccentric musician. I'll leave it at that. So this tape I played the shit out of. Years ago I tracked it again. This isn't the original copy I had. This is on this is on Priority. And I think it's a K-Tel comp, or I could be wrong, but this is on a clear tape. I think the one that I had was opaque, whatever. But mentioning K-Tel, they were compilations that came out that had, you know, all these rock bands. This isn't an old one that I had back in the day, but a friend of mine from Syracuse gave this to me years ago. And it's kind of funny because, as you can see, he's blacked out all the songs that he thinks suck. You got Megadeth, Darkest Hour, Surf Nicaragua by Sacred Reich. And then you can see it's crossed out. Rock Me Like a Hurricane doesn't want to have anything to do with that. This has Anthrax, Caught in a Mosh as well. Great White is blacked out on it. Striper is blacked out on it. Even Armored Saint. I mean, come on. Armored Saint's cool. But anyway, so that's how I discovered a lot of the classic stuff, like Dio, Motley Crue, Scorpions, except it was on these cheap K-Tel compilations, and they were available at most drugstores, record stores. They were samplers, essentially, and they only cost a couple of bucks. So this was the cream of the crop for me, though. I bought this at a Phase drugstore, which was a local drugstore in my area, and listened to the shit out of it. And it's funny because I wore the tape out and it broke, and kind of just moved on from there. And it's also odd because a lot of the songs didn't stick with me. Maybe because I was so young and the music was so abrasive, it was just harder to absorb it. But that Slayer Evil Has No Boundaries with the chant of evil in the chorus over and over again was something that I always wanted to go back to. Not long after I did purchase Show No Mercy and proceeded to wear that out. So later that year, I hopped on my skateboard and went to Shoppingtown Mall in Syracuse, New York, and bought this bad boy on cassette. And I've shown this a couple of times, several times at least, I think. This is Game Over by Nuclear Assault. And what a scary record for me at the time. I went through a brief religious phase when I was a kid. My aunt and my grandmother dragged me out to see Billy Graham, and I was like saved and stuff. which my hippie parents weren't into at all. You know, they were deadheads and were pretty much totally secular. But the whole religion thing didn't last for long when I got into metal and skateboarding and stuff like that. This is a great record. It's kind of reviled / loved, but depending on who you talk to, for its kind of thin guitar tone. For a while, I was over it and hated it compared to the couple of records that came after because of that whole guitar tone thing. And now I think it sounds like a great, stripped down, angry, Motorhead kind of fueled or inspired New York hardcore driven thrash metal record, and I don't think there's anything like it. This is one of those records along with Show No Mercy that I'll never get sick of, that I can listen to over and over again, that I'll throw on whenever the mood takes me very, very frequently. But you got Live, Suffer, Die and Cold Steel, all these kind of Kill 'Em All, Motorhead kind of sort of along those lines, great rock and roll inspired thrash kind of songs. But you also have Hang the Pope, which is like a blasting hardcore punk, early TRI, SOD kind of thing. My America's another one with this great like 4/4 kind of New York hardcore kind of mosh kind of thing that lasts like 26 seconds. Then you got Brain Death, which is this epic 7-minute long song about being under the knife, being on the operating table. And I remember that and Stranded in Hell actually scaring me lyrically as a kid, coming out of the sort of somewhat religious background. Great stuff, kind of nasally shouted, kind of phlegmy fucking thrash metal vocals from John Connolly. Awesome stuff. You know, it's got that whole Cold War era, fear of nuclear war thing fueling it, and it's just a fucking great record. Wore it out as well. It's crazy. I remember skating to the mall, buying this and a pair of fingerless leather gloves with studs in them when I bought it. Like, that's very much 1989. I had a fishtail skateboard. That's totally the era. That's where all my nostalgia lies with this. But the tape I had of this, I feel like it had the song Lesbians on it, and I'm not sure why that's not on this. I don't think this was like a PC era thing where that was like offensive, or I don't know, maybe Danny Wilker had a crisis of conscience or something like that, conscience rather. But yeah, kind of an offensive song that I don't think is serious about lesbians on it. But another fast punk ripper. And then I got Fistful of Metal. This I may have even gotten before the sampler. I don't remember. It's so long ago. But this was also purchased on cassette, which is a common thing. You know, I feel like a lot of people bought stuff on cassette in this era of the 80s that are around my age or a little bit older. Another one that I just wore out, was unplayable by the time I was done with it. I was very much in love with Anthrax, and this was a time where you just got what was on the shelf or what you happened to pick out. They were about a year away from doing Persistence of Time, I think, when I purchased this. Persistence of Time came out in 90. And I'm sure at that point they were known for all their goofier, bordering on crossover, kind of, you know, hardcore-inspired stuff, the Bermuda shorts and all that kind of thing, Ninja Turtle guitars. This is a straight-up new wave of British heavy metal and power metal-driven, inspired kind of record, drawing from those wells, those pools of influence. Very Judas Priest, very Merciful Fate. If you know the record, you know that. The only record to feature Neil Turbin, who, from what I've read, unfortunately was kind of an asshole and didn't get along with Danny Lilker, didn't get along with Scott Ian that well, which is a pity, because sometimes I prefer him to Belladonna, depending on my mood. Just great, piercing, straight up metal as fuck vocals. You got Metal Thrashing Mad, which of course is a live staple and a total fist in the air kind of banger that could go pair up next to any Exciter song on a mixtape or any of that kind of level of stuff, even Anvil, you know, that kind of powerful heavy metal. Moving down the road in a Street Machine of Steel. Great lyrics. Death Rider, you know, there's just enough of the chunky thrash thing sort of starting to bleed into the riffage on this. That is great. Panic's another good one. There isn't a dud track on this except maybe the cover of I'm 18 by Alice Cooper. But at that time I hadn't heard Alice Cooper, and I have kind of a soft spot for this because it was more of a radio-friendly, pop-oriented kind of song. Howling Furies is great. Kind of evil, you know, insidious kind of tune about like these howling furies, whatever the fuck they're supposed to be. Maybe some kind of spirits or something coming for you. The Howling Furies come out to play, I think, are the lyrics. Soldiers of Metal. I mean, this is a great record. None of their other records, other than maybe the Armed and Dangerous EP that come after this, really sounds like this at all. But it's just awesome. It came out on Megaforce back when Johnny Z was doing his thing. It's just awesome stuff. Nuclear Assault was Combat, of course, and let's see what color the labels are. I don't remember if it's camo or the pea soup green. It's a camo. But yeah, I don't know. Just wanted to kind of do this shoot from the hip kind of thing. Not really gonna fuck around with editing or try to fucking fix my stuttering, who cares? But I wanted to just talk about some influential records. Sorry about that. Battery was running low, so it came to warn me that my phone was running out of charge and cut off the video. I was wrapping up anyway. What I really just wanted to do was talk a little bit about, like, you know, what was setting me down the path. You know, I like to talk about the history. More of my interest in the whole YouTube community or the vinyl community or whatever cheesy kind of tag you want to give it is more of like the personal kind of history of what kind of set people and set their tastes and what they were listening to back in the day and nostalgia and stuff like that, as opposed to just stamp collector scum kind of shit. That's interesting to a certain degree, but you know, it gets old for me. So I want to talk to you about Little Pat, Baby Pat, little guy, Tony Hawk, fucking skater cut, listening to Nuclear Assault, and I don't know. Probably go up to 91 next, and then 96. I'm not sure. I was listening to very different stuff depending on the year, as my journey was sort of continuing on, and my listening tapes were evolving. My listening tastes were evolving. So yeah, I just want to talk about that stuff. I hope you enjoy it. What'll be interesting is talking about my years that I kind of despised metal and kind of shunned it for a little while there. It was just too punk for it. But I'll jump off that bridge when I come to it. All right, talk to you guys later. Bye.